There's so much research that shows that the most diverse workplaces are the most successful, are the
Yep.
most innovative, are better than their competitors who are less diverse. That's what you want. So I think it all boils down to the people that make up your workplace, wanting to be there, feeling like they belong and they're accepted, and working their hardest for you because it's a company that's worth standing by.
We want to talk to you guys about the do's and don'ts as it relates to diversity and inclusion and how you can go about building both diverse and talented workforces. Again, I'm Matthew Harrison, Vice President of Human Resources for Jackson Healthcare, and I have with me my good friend, employment attorney Darah Okeke, who's also President of Epic Consulting. So again, Darah, our topic today is talking about the do's and don'ts around diversity and inclusion in the workforce.
Yes.
So what have you seen as some of the most cringe-worthy don'ts that have happened kind of from your own experiences or that you have just seen in the workplace in general?
Yes, there are many cringeworthy moments. To name a few, performative acts of alliance with particular causes or with certain political positions that aren't backed up with substance. That's one of the biggest don'ts. If you're an organization and you truly value diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to see that in the fabric of your culture, not just in a clever marketing campaign, not just in a tweet, on Twitter. I really want to see that you're practicing what you preach.
So what are things related to do's and don'ts around diversity and inclusion should these leaders be taken into consideration and make sure that they're doing to make sure that that outward brand that they have is one that's positive?
That's a great question. It's going to be different for each company, but I think one thing that all companies and all leaders can do consistently is decide where they stand. Decide what are our values? What do we hold most dear? What is our mission? What are we trying to accomplish, not only as a business, but for the world? How are we trying to make the world a better place? I don't think any company or any executive should be forced into a political position, a social justice issue, unless it's something that they genuinely align with and care about. And so I think before you decide how you're going to respond to the public or how you present yourself to the world, internally, the leadership has to decide, who are we? What matters most to us? What do we stand for? What are those issues that we're willing to step out there and really stick our necks out for? And what are those that, that doesn't align with our personal values and we're not going to make as bold of a statement? I think once you get to that place of feeling really confident and comfortable in who you are as an organization, it makes it easier to kind of present yourself to the world in a way that is authentic and real to the company and its values, but that also resonates well with the public. Then that brings me to my second don't. When it comes to workplace initiatives around DEI, consult the experts. I think everyone can do something in this work. Everyone has a role to play, but I think a lot of people poo-poo DEI and don't understand that it's a true discipline.
Yep.
That there is a lot of research in this space. There are a lot of experts in this space and people who've been working for many years to figure out how to make this work within corporate America. And so, it's not just coming up with a clever idea and immediately going to implement it. Really talk to the people that it will impact. If you're trying to create an initiative that's going to benefit your people of color at your workplace or women at your workplace, talk to them. Don't come up with something without having the people who it's intended for at least lay eyes on it or be able to give some meaningful input and feedback. That's critically important. Don't number 3 is don't rush. This work is so important, and like I said, it really should be part of the fabric of a company. don't rush to push out initiatives and push out programs and policies without really taking the time to make sure, number one, is this something that's really needed for our company? Number two, if it is needed, do we have the data to back that up? Do we have the research to back it up that, for example, if there is a pay equity issue within your company, then you'll have the data to show, we're seeing some discrepancies when it comes to the pay of our women versus men, or our Black and brown employees versus others. And so based on that data, you craft an initiative that makes sense. And then once you're at that stage, you have to be able to measure. Don't just kind of let it fly and not look back again. You want to be able to measure what it is that you've done and know that it's bringing about true change. Or if it's not, then we need to switch it up and we need to fix some things. But don't rush to roll things out without really being thoughtful and having the data to back it up, but also having measurable goals in place to monitor over time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like also kind of what I'm hearing from you, something that also would be cringeworthy is doing nothing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so with that, what then are things that organizations should do when it comes to, creating diverse and equitable and inclusive work environments?
Absolutely. So first I'm going to start high level, and then I'm going to get into very specific initiatives, which I think our leaders would like to hear.
Yep.
Some ideas of things that I've seen work really well. But high level, kind of thinking about what you should do as a CEO, a president, a company leader. I always harken back to my company name, which is EPIC. EPIQ, the acronym, stands for Educate, Prioritize, Invest, and Quantify. And I think that is exactly how companies should approach diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number one is the education piece. That's kind of where we start. There have been all types of research that say that training on diversity isn't enough. Everyone wants to do some kind of training, whether it's implicit bias, equal employment opportunity. I agree that it's not enough to bring about change, but I do think that it's the foundation. We have to have a baseline of knowledge about inequality in the workplace and what that looks like in real life before we can try to fix it. So I think education is key, not only educating yourself on these concepts of diversity and equity versus equality, but also educating yourself on your business and your people. What does your workforce look like? What are the people that come to work for you every day? Who are they and what do they value?
And how are they feeling?
And how are they feeling? Checking in with them. So educating yourself from a substantive perspective when it comes to the practice of DE&I, but then also educating yourself about who your business really is. Who are the people that make up your business, and how are they feeling, and what more do you need to know about them to craft a plan that makes the most sense? Then you come to the prioritize piece. So we've done the education. We've kind of identified those gaps in our company or in our culture that need to be fixed. You can't do everything. It's impossible. You will run your HR department and your D&I department absolutely crazy trying to do it all. It's very important that businesses prioritize what matters most, what they can get the most traction on, but also what's the most meaningful and important for their employees and the goals they're trying to achieve. Once you prioritize, now it's time to spend some money, where it's time
Put
to
your
invest.
money where your mouth is.
Put your money where your mouth is. And invest isn't only about monetary resources, it's also about people resources. It's about making sure that you have what you need to implement and execute on this plan. So whether it's making sure that you've got a budget in place. It's very difficult to be a D&I expert or an HR practitioner and to be given these lofty goals of what you want to do to advance diversity within an organization, but no budget to really support you and back you up. And that's the plight of many practitioners. So you got to have the budget, but you've also got to have the people available, and people that, even if they're not expert in it, can they be trained? Can they shadow? Is it something you should do in-house, or should you find an external expert to assist with your efforts? Just figuring out the best way to invest the resources in the right places to get the job done. And then the last part is to quantify, to measure over time. And this is what I referred to earlier. You can't create a plan and you can't execute it without taking a look back to see how we're doing. And I think only the best diversity initiatives have measurable goals in place place and a tracking system, you know, periodic tracking and monitoring. How are we doing? Should we tweak this? Is it successful? How are employees responding to this? Are they using this new benefit? You know, these are all things that we need to know to figure out, does this even make sense? Is it working for us, or do we need to go back and tweak some things?
No, totally agree. And I think the key piece with that quantify one is business leaders have to get and understand that with this, they may not necessarily see those immediate results that they may be used to. And so just because you don't see traction in the first 3, 6, or maybe even 12 months, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is a waste of your time and effort.
Exactly.
And so you have to be able to be okay with small and incremental change, but that it will ultimately be change that's going to be worthwhile, and again, kind of shifting that culture.
Agreed.
Yeah. So what do you say to a leader in terms of how do they communicate to their employees in a way so that even though the things that they're doing may be small, slow, or incremental, how do they go about it still letting their employees know that work is being done?
That's a great question. It's important for leaders to check in and to do it regularly, and to also do it in moments where it's significant to the employee. You know, for example, when certain things happen in the world, you know, when there is a really tragic event that you know is going to hit home for a good portion of your employees, that will make them sad or make them introspective, or maybe it's something to celebrate that's happening in terms of current events. Check in. It's a good thing for your employees to have a face and a name and a personality and an experience that goes with, you know, this leader. And you can do that in many ways. I mean, you know, many businesses have all hands meetings, you know, once a week where, you know, it's only 30 minutes, but during that time, the most senior leaders get up and check in with employees and let them know the state of the business, but also speak to something that's currently happening in the world and that's impacting people today. It can be a regular note to your employee, you know, President's Corner, or, you know, or something cute like that. But I think however you do it, it needs to be authentic to you. But I think you also need to be trying to reach your employees in a meaningful way. So just check in with them. Let them know, like, if you're working on a diversity initiative and you're not there yet and you have delays, let them know that.
Yeah, it's all about the transparency.
Okay. It's about the transparency, which builds a relationship of trust. And that's what you really want. Your employees want to know that you're working on it. It's going to happen. This is something you care about and you're invested in it. But if they don't hear from you for 6 months, how do they know? You know, and then they start to guess, you know, what's going on.
And usually guess negatively.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They assume the worst. So I think the more that employers can step out of their offices and kind of step from behind the veil and reveal their true selves, and really show that they care and check in and provide meaningful updates, the better. And now I would love to get into the more specific initiatives, because this is my favorite part. And I know you've done this work as well, so you probably have much to share, but I love talking to leaders about specifically, like, what can I actually do? You know, what's an initiative that you've seen work and that you think could be portable to my workplace. You know, and we can start from kind of the recruitment and hiring piece of things. One thing that I've seen work especially well has been a diverse slate initiative. I'm sure you're very familiar, but essentially the idea is that when you are interviewing for particular roles, and some employers make it a policy across the board, others limit it to the positions where they really are seeing the biggest lack of diversity. But when you're interviewing for a particular requisition, then you have as a practice and a policy that you will make sure that you interview at least one woman and at least one person of color at that final stage of the interview process. And this is actually a result of the Rooney Rule, which started in the NFL, where the same policy was rolled out to make sure that at least one black person was interviewed at the final stage for head coaching jobs, and resulted in a significant increase in hiring of black coaches. So a lot of private workplaces have kind of taken that and transformed it for their own purposes. I've seen it done at multiple workplaces and seen it work extremely well in terms of increasing the diversity of those individuals that we're hiring for certain roles.
Absolutely. I will say, so I know for a fact, like with the Rooney Rule, in the first 4 years of its inception, I think initially the number of black coaches in the NFL were 6%, and then in 4 years it went up to 22%.
Yeah.
And I'll say personally here at Jackson Healthcare, I took over leading talent acquisition here in June of 2019 and put that in place. And within a year, we saw our increase in the number of people of color that we hired into new roles. It went from 9% to 25%, and that's the only thing we changed.
Yes, and I've seen it be so effective, and it seems like such a small
Simple.
thing.
Yep.
Because when you think about it, you're not promising to hire
Nope.
any particular
Nope.
person. You're just promising that on that final stage of the interview, it will be a diverse slate.
It's like, and the people will be considered.
Exactly. But it makes a difference for employers. It also makes a big difference for candidates to see that the employers that they're interested in have a policy like that. And it makes it seem like a much more welcoming and inclusive place to work. So that's one thing that I've seen be extremely effective. Also, I often hear, not often, but often enough, I hear from some business leaders, well, the black talent just isn't out there. The Hispanic talent just isn't there. We can't find them. It doesn't exist. And the problem is they don't know where to look.
Yep.
And they're not looking hard enough. There are so many historically black colleges and universities, minority-centered industry associations, black fraternities and sororities. I mean, the list goes on in terms of sources of diverse talent, and highly skilled and highly educated diverse talent. And I think, what we need our sourcers and our recruiters and our managers and hiring managers to do is to look harder and to go to those sources. If you don't know where to look, then ask. There are plenty of opportunities and plenty of professionals in this field that you could ask, but targeted campaigns for recruiting to these diverse sources, whether it's education and college-based or professional associations, I've seen that work extremely well. And a lot of these people are kind of sitting here twiddling their thumbs, wondering where the employers are. So I think that's also something that I've seen done really well by many employers who have like a very well thought out and detailed campaign for how they're going to target different sources of diverse talent that they wouldn't normally tap into.
Yeah, and I've always felt like from a recruiting perspective, it's almost kind of this domino effect, that's something you certainly have to have attention and energy around if your numbers are currently low.
Right.
But I think what's so amazing is once you start doing that and you start getting more diverse people into your organization, kind of going back to what we've talked about previously, this whole notion of sameness and how, generally we are around people who are similar to ourselves. So when you start getting that diverse talent in your organization, guess what? They know other diverse, talented people.
Exactly.
And so it becomes a lot easier to then start having those internal referrals of diverse people who are just as capable and as qualified. The thing is just getting, again, kind of that first set of people in the door first.
Absolutely.
I think some other things is important for organizations to also kind of take a step back and not only think about it from their perspective, but think about it from that potential employee or current employee perspective. So from a potential employer perspective, if you're trying to recruit in new talent, I think it's important for companies to get and understand it's important that the interview panel that person is interviewing with is diverse.
Yeah.
Someone who is of color, it may mean something to them to be able to see that there are other people similar to them that took part in the hiring process or will be a part of this organization that they're joining.
Absolutely, and that was going to be my next one, is referral programs.
Yeah.
Referral programs where you are using your black talent and your women talent as referral sources and paying attention to the referrals that they send you. Because like you said, like a lot of people walk in like-minded circles and have similarly talented and expert friends or family members that they could refer to your business. So I think that's an excellent point that you make and something I've seen be super successful as well. Exit interviews. So I know we're jumping a little bit.
That's fine.
But I think it's always important for employers to take stock of what's happened. Whether someone leaves on good terms or bad terms, you want to know what went down. And often, I think we as people of color will leave quietly. We don't want to cause. I don't want to cause a stir. I'm ready to go. I found another opportunity. when really there could be underlying reasons of discrimination or bias or even harassment that we experienced, and we just want to be done with it.
Yeah.
And it's always nice when someone reaches out to you and really asks, how was your experience here? Is there something that we did wrong? What could we do better? I think that's important for employers, and I think it says a lot to the employee that you care enough to check in with them. And you have to remember, every employee that you ever have could potentially be a marketing source for you.
Yep,
because they're
absolutely.
going to go on and continue maybe in the same industry or in the same geographic area, and they're going to say something about you. And you would hope that it's something positive and good about their experience. So I think taking advantage of the opportunity to do exit interviews with your diverse employees who depart, whether it's under good circumstances or not, it shows a lot that you care. And it goes back to what you mentioned, I think in part two, employees want their boss and their manager and their company that they work for to be authentic and genuine and compassionate. I want to know that you care about me. I understand that this relationship is somewhat transactional. I provide a service, you give me a paycheck, but it's more than that. Think about how much time we spend at work and with our colleagues.
90,000 hours, so the average person spends a third of their lifetime at work.
See, you didn't have to break it down like that. That's way higher than I even thought.
It's a little depressing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but to your point, spending that much time at work, we definitely should be creating spaces where people, like we said, are bringing their fullest and truest selves. To your point about, I think, the exit interviews, I think another thing companies could and should be doing, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder.
No, please.
Is before it even gets to the exit interview, I know a lot of companies do employee engagement surveys on an annual or every other year basis, making sure that there are diversity and inclusion related questions that are a part of that, and making sure that they're parceling out responses that they get based on race, based on gender, based on age, so that you can see if there are perceptions of fairness or different things around the company culture that differs based on those different demographics.
100% agree. And also somewhat connected to that, but including DEI goals within manager evaluation. I think that's critical. A lot of companies are afraid to do it. And I understand, it's, for a lot of people, DEI is a new space, it's a new territory. And there's also a lot of discomfort around setting certain goals or quotas, which are not permitted, but goals are okay. Goals are aspirational. Goals are desired results. Quotas are required numbers or percentages, which can be illegal under many circumstances. But I think it is really smart to, as we talk about weaving equity and inclusion into the fabric of the company, that also needs to be part of performance management for your leaders. Leaders have to be held accountable for how they treat their employees. And one way that you do that is by making that goal of having a more inclusive team, of increasing the diverse representation on your team, making that part of the review process. And even taking it a step further and impacting compensation to the extent that certain goals are not met. That's when a company is taking it really seriously and showing their employees and the world really how much it matters to them that they transform in this very important way.
I know a lot of organizations, and we have them at Jackson Healthcare. We call ours associate network groups. Other companies may call them employee resource groups or business resource groups. But again, having these social outlets where, again, it's highlighting the importance and value of diversity and inclusion, and again, making that a part of the culture of the organization.
Absolutely. I was going to also mention these employee resource groups or business resource groups. People feel weird about them. Some people do. I think there's this kind of idea that, well, aren't you separating even more or self-segregating by having these groups that are focused on, the Black employee resource group or the women's group? And then but my thought is that, well, yeah, we are separating ourselves, but we're also creating a safe space and an environment that can be very difficult for us. And I think, when we talk about bringing your whole and your full self to work, you got to feel safe to be able to do that. If you don't feel safe in your workplace, if you're one of the only or one of very few, it's hard to bring your full self and to present that way. And so I think these resource groups help to kind of create this place of safety and comfort and familiarity when you're a minority within your organization. And I think that those companies and those leaders that understand that and respect that, and really give their employee resource groups the funds and the executive sponsorship and support that they need to thrive, they have seen tremendous gains when it comes to equity and inclusion and how employees feel about the workplace.
Yeah, I agree. One thing we've done with our associate network groups at Jackson Healthcare is we also use it as an opportunity to really reinforce the importance of allyship, and we really highlight the inclusion piece of it. And somewhat toot my own horn because there are groups that I created.
Toot away.
Toot away. But I think because what it does for me is, to your point, it allows for people who are not a part of that group to be educated on what it's potentially like to be an other.
Yeah.
Whether it's being a woman, being a person of color, and how that does have an impact on what your experience is like in the workplace. And so one of the things I always really stress whenever I talk about our associate network groups at Jackson Healthcare is that you don't have to be in order to belong.
Yeah.
And so we want white people to be a part of the People of Color Network. We want men to be in the Women's Network. I used to say we want old people to be in the Young Professionals Network, but now I say we want
seasoned.
Seasoned would be better.
Okay, we don't say old.
Or youthfully challenged.
No.
We want, because again, the experiences are different, and we want people to know that you don't have to be in that demographic. And what we've done is we've actually purposely we have two executive champions for each of our groups, and we have one of those executive champions to not be of the demographic.
Right.
So for the People of Color Network, I'm one of the executive champions. We have a white male that's also another executive champion, because we're really wanting people to know that you can be white. We want you to be a part of this so that you can hear and understand our experiences.
Absolutely. And that's what it all boils down to, I think, is listening, understanding, sharing with each other our experiences, our hardships, how difficult it is sometimes to show up to work when things that are crazy are happening in the world, and how different we are, but also how similar we can be. Just finding that common ground, I think, is so critical. One last initiative that I wanted to mention that I think is really important, and I think we're starting to see employers do more of as we see more pay equity laws and pay transparency laws that are being enacted. It's very important that employers do periodic pay equity reviews for their employees. The wage gap is very real. I think black women make around 63 cents on the dollar compared to their white male counterparts. And it's horrible. And it's even worse for Hispanic women. So, I think it's really important, and this is kind of that low-hanging fruit. Like we're just talking about numbers here. Doing a review of your compensation and your pay bands, having a better understanding of why people are placed at a certain position within a band. What are the objective factors that you're considering when you're setting employee pay? And then as you promote and you develop and people get raises and bonuses, making sure that you're always looking back so that everyone is in alignment. And to the extent that there is some disalignment, is race a factor? And even if it's unintentional, it could still be a legal violation because it results in a disparate impact. So I think that's something that's pretty easy for employers to do. There are plenty of experts that will do it for them, but that's an easy way to show your employees, like, look, we understand that this is a problem. We're doing our best to correct it and to make sure that everyone is paid equally for doing equal work.
Absolutely. And I think somewhat related to that would be looking at kind of the promotion velocity for your employees or associates. Are people of color being able to advance in their careers at the same rate as your white employees? And if that's not the case, why is that the case? And a lot of that, obviously, I think will tie into the whole pay equity piece as well. I want to go back to a piece that you had talked about a little bit earlier, because I do think it's important for our leaders to get and understand that, with this work, because of how sensitive it is, I really want them to know, that they want to really take steps back before they jump into a lot of these initiatives and make sure that they're doing them appropriately. Because I will say, I think one of the biggest mistakes you can do, while you may be well intended, if you don't already have the staff within your HR or legal group that gets and understands a lot of these initiatives, you may end up doing yourself a lot more harm than
Right.
good. And so I want them to, know and be okay with having an external resource come in and do it. And I will even say this, I have done this work for a long time, did it while I was in graduate school, wrote a few book chapters in academic journal articles.
Humble brag, humble brag.
And so, I feel very well versed in it. But I will say we brought in and started a race series here at Jackson Healthcare, and we chose to use an external vendor for that.
Yeah.
And we did it purposely. And it's because with me working in human resources, though I feel our leadership felt very confident it was something that I probably could do and could do well, we didn't want it to be viewed as this HR mandate.
Yeah.
Because again, you have to think about with a lot of these initiatives, the mindset that you potentially are setting up for the participants. And so a lot of times having someone externally come in, it shifts that mindset
Yeah.
and allows people to be a little bit more open
Yeah.
than what they would have been had it been done internally.
Agreed.
Can you talk a little bit more about kind of your thoughts around how companies should go about approaching it, whether or not they should use someone internally versus externally?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the particular company. Some companies are so well resourced that they have, huge HR departments and huge diversity, equity, and inclusion teams to execute on their initiatives. I don't think that's the case for most companies. I think most companies, they might have an HR department, but if they do, that HR department does not have a level of expertise in this space. And so I think that's when it's important to kind of look outside and see if there are external experts that can come in and really learn your business and understand how you work and what your goals are and help you with these things. I think the DIY method is ill-advised
Yes.
unless you have that in-house expertise or unless you're willing to invest in that. Again, going back to the invest piece of that EPIC model, if this is something that you're seeing as a problem within your company, then maybe this is a team that you should consider creating, or maybe allow a few HR people to do a branch out where they get intensive study and education in this DEI space so that they can be the champions going forward. But I think you're going to have to invest one way or another. So you're either doing it internally with your existing people, or you're hiring for new roles and departments, or you're finding someone expert externally who can help to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely. So for our leaders that are listening and watching us, what would you say is the ultimate end game for them? Why is this going to be valuable and really change their organizations?
The end game is the best workplace you could possibly have. Plenty of people talk about the business case for diversity and inclusion, or, well, you should just do it because it's the right thing to do. I think it's all of those things, but I think ultimately you want to work for an excellent company. You want people that come to work every day excited to be there, using their most innovative minds and being as creative and thoughtful and team-oriented as possible. So I think there's so much research that shows that the most diverse workplaces are the most successful, are the most innovative, are better than their competitors who are less diverse. That's what you want. So I think it all boils down to the people that make up your workplace, wanting to be there, feeling like they belong and they're accepted, and working their hardest for you because it's a company that's worth standing by.
Totally agree with you. I mean, I always feel like at the end of the day, workplaces could and should be a microcosm of our society, especially for ones that are producing consumer goods or things that the public is consuming.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want your workplace to be representative of the audience you're trying to serve? Those individuals are going to bring into your company ideas and thoughts that are going to probably better resonate with a wider range of people.
Absolutely.
So exactly. So as we did with our prior two segment, I would love for you to end this one with things that our leaders that are watching and listening to us, what are things that they should study, see, and share as it pertains to this?
Share, yes. Okay, our last one.
I know.
So for study, there is an excellent book called How to Be an Anti-Racist by Kendi, I believe is his last name. Highly recommend. And the title kind of speaks for itself. But I think I want to emphasize that being an anti-racist is a proactive effort.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where a lot of us in this work feels like that's where we should be moving to next.
Right.
In organizations. So hopefully many organizations have started that piece around getting and understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
The next step is taking those proactive steps and being anti-racist.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's the study. The C is one of my favorite movies called Hidden Figures with Taraji P. Henson. Just absolutely love it. Love how it represents Black women in the workplace in history, and just the triumph that you see at the end it's amazing. And then for share, this is again, comfort zone to the wayside. So for the share, I think it would be really special if our listeners took some time to try to share the gift of mentorship with someone who's underrepresented within your company. It doesn't have to be a big time commitment. It could be a coffee together, every couple of months, exchanging emails here and there to check in and see how the person is doing, going for a walk on a lunch break every now and then. But it's really about spending time with someone, sharing your gifts, your experiences, listening to them, listening to how they're doing at work. What are their goals? What are their aspirations? Are they happy in their current role? Are there things that are impacting their ability to be as effective as they'd want to be? When I look back over my personal career, I've had so many wonderful sponsors and mentors that were also friends eventually. And they weren't all Black, and they weren't all women. I've had, white men almost double my age who have really just been helpful to me and were invested in me and saw something special in me and wanted to take the time to help to mentor and develop me. And I think it's so important that we all do that we all kind of counteract that bias towards sameness, and we reach out to someone different from us and really try to not only help them, but understand that in being in relationship with someone different, that's going to help you as well. So that's the share for this last session.
Well, thank you so much, Darah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time over these last 3 segments, and thank you all for joining us. This work is not easy. I want to tell you guys there will probably be times that you're going to do or say things that aren't the right thing. You're human. That is okay. What's most important is that you see this as important work, and work that is really going to be meaningful for your companies. So thank you so much for joining me, for joining Darah, and take care.